Hey guys, this is Alex, and we're going to cover a recap for the action that I took today on day number 5 in the simulator. And unfortunately, I was unable to hide my practice trade today. It came very quickly after I closed up for the day. So all that information is going to be visible. So I'm sorry if that's confusing. I did mention that, I was going to try to hide that stuff and try to limit the confusion with this two account system that I'm working right now, but I wasn't able to do that today. So I guess I might as well recap all three. I'm closing the day red on all three trades. It was a very disappointing day. And so we'll take a look at what I did and what's coming up in the near future. So before the open today, it looked like I was going to take a no trades day. I must say, until about 9:05 a.m., I was really thinking that there was just nothing up there that really interested me. And a note about me is that I have a bit of a habit, although it's not a super pronounced one, but in the past I have been known to take questionable trades on the days leading up to the day where my account fees are charged. Now, I mentioned in a previous recap that I think it was the last one that my account fees are going to be charged on the 4th. So that means tomorrow morning before the open, I will be taking a $124 hit to my equity and to simulate account fees. And added, that kind of adds pressure to the situation for me, especially given the lack of profit that I've been able to squeeze out of November so far, even though, I've only had 3 active days or 4 active days to try and build it up. I was very mindful of that coming in. I really didn't want to get myself into some sticky situations and take questionable setups. So when the gap scanner didn't really look all that hot, I thought, okay, I might just shut her down at like 9:30, 9:45, something like that, very shortly after the bell. And if nothing pops up, then I'm just going to close her down and maybe take some practice trades. But other than that, I wasn't really planning much for today. Now, I got surprised at 9 a.m. when OBLN suddenly released a press release that was very positive, and the stock squeezed up pretty quickly up to 215, pulled back a little bit, and this was the chart that I was looking at going into the open. And so OBLN was entirely the focus. Everything else, I had already pretty much written off. It all seemed questionable to me. And so what I was looking for, or what I noticed rather pre-market, was it looked to me as if there was a hidden seller at 215 on OBLN. I kept seeing very light orders on the level 2 mixed with quite a bit of volume in the tape, which is a telltale sign of a hidden seller. And so I was really not looking to get involved with this stock below 215. I thought, I'm not going to trade it pre-market. I'm going to wait for the bell. And if we can break 215, then I'll probably take a small starter. And this is what I have mapped out right now. This is what I was looking at going into the bell. 215 was the target entry. My primary stop was going to be 203, and then my hard stop, my secondary stop, was going to be $2. And you can see that the first and second stops, these are pretty close together. There had been some reactions to 203 pre-market, and $2 is a pretty strong psychological level, and I wasn't really willing to go further down than that, especially given that there would probably be an add-on further up if it had started running on volume. And so I didn't really want to get in a situation where I might lose $120 on a trade on a day that was really not looking that great overall. Now, I don't normally like to trade the first minute of the day. It's very rare that I will do that. My attitude is generally to wait for patterns to really be solidified and to get a really good feeling of the market sentiment during regular hours. And today was a case where I entered OBLN. My first trade was 5 seconds after the bell, as you can see over here on my trades window. And that was a reaction to very strong volume that came out in the first minute. And we broke 215 with quite a bit of aggression. It dipped down initially to 208 and came right back up and broke 215, which was the level that I was looking for. And so I took my starter of 250 shares. Well, I got filled at 218, which also gives you an idea of the speed of it. It wasn't a slow grind through 215. It broke pretty high and popped right up. And on the next candle, it started continuing and, made another high of day. And the volume was still pretty strong. The one thing that turned me off was the thickness of the level 2. It seemed to me that even though this was supposed to be like a 2 million share float stock, it was trading, in my opinion, as if it was like a 25 or a 35 million share float. And I'm not quite sure why that is. But in any case, I ended up adding on. I'll talk about why I don't like my add-on later. But about a minute after my initial entry, I added half a position at 222, which was following a break of 221 where there was a lot of sellers. I decided to add, and that's what I did at 222. And almost immediately after, it hit 224, reversed completely. And as you can see in my trades window, I was working with two stops, and I decided to actually use both of them. Like I didn't just start thinking about stopping out at my first one. I didn't like the price action. I didn't like the way it was breaking down, and it looked to me like it would probably go back down below $2. But I wanted to hang on to half the position just in case that it curled back up, and I didn't want to get completely faked out by this wash. So I stopped out half at 207, and when the move continued to break down, right here on the next 1 minute candle, that's when I exited the rest of the position. And so I took a pretty substantial hit right away. Only 2 minutes and 45 seconds after the bell, I was down a substantial amount that made me consider quitting for the day already, because I wasn't really liking. This was the best thing on my watch list by far, and to have it pop and drop that quickly into the day, it seemed to me like it was a bearish sign of the overall market, and it didn't really appeal to me. And I figured I would need a pretty strong setup to get back in. Now, unlike my first trade on OBLN, my second one was one I had very high conviction in. I was super confident, as you can see by just the fact that I took it. I mean, I mentioned after my first trade, I was thinking about closing up shop, and I thought it would take a pretty strong entry, or take a pretty strong setup for me to get involved. Now, I wasn't too impressed with the volume situation, as you can see down here, was fading away. But then a spike came out of nowhere and broke the key level that I was watching, which was 210. And so I decided to take a starter, which would probably end up to be my full position. I'll get to why that is later. And, this volume spike compared to the previous candles where there was a little bit of chop, I thought that was great confirmation. I thought, okay, this is going to be like a red to green move / curl, like opening range breakout, whatever you want to call it. This was multiple setups in one, and I felt really confident about it. And even looking back now with, the benefit of hindsight, I still would take this again. I mean, it failed. So I'll move the chart forward here, and you can see it got rejected very harshly. And even though this ended up failing miserably, I would take it again anytime. I was thinking, oh, this is perfect. I've got a trade that can, recuperate my losses from the questionable setup that I took out of the bell. And I stand by it. I don't think any further amount of analysis is going to make me dislike this entry. And I think if I were to review like a replay of the time in sales, if I were to slow everything down to way, way below real time, I would still be comfortable about it. And that's including the fact that I wasn't super happy with how thickly it was being traded and how fat the level 2 was. And, a couple of other factors that I wasn't super happy about. And I still stand by this trade. Now, even though I don't have a lot to say about the negative results of these trades, like I'm not really disappointed in the fact that I took either of them, even though I'm less enthusiastic about my first one. The fact that both of them added up to a $108 loss, which is more than 5% of my account equity, that pretty much sealed the deal. I mean, going into the second trade, how strong the setup was, I thought, okay, if this thing fails, then it's game over. And it's the number one thing on my watch list. And even if I minimize damage, like even if I had exited earlier and was able to foresee the breakdown, like let's say I had only lost $5 on this trade instead of whatever it is, I'll check in a minute, I still would have closed the day. I mean, 0 for 2 on the strongest thing on my watch list, that's not the kind of start that leads to big wins for me. The history is very clear on that. I have a lot of data to back it up that, my big days come when I have maybe one red trade right away. but not a big one. Typically, it's small winners at first lead to my biggest days. Building a small cushion and feeling emotionally free to, get involved with higher share size. That's where my big winners come from. And so I figured that the likelihood that I would turn this day around was very low. And so as soon as I stopped out, I solidified my thought that no, I'm not going to take any more trades today. Now, I'm not going to speak too much about my thinking in my PDSB trade. What I will mention quickly, though, is that it fits exactly the pattern that I'm trying to work on with my practice trades that I've detailed before. So I'll just quickly open up the sim tab and mention that all of these trades are based on halt resumptions. That's what I'm trying to improve on here specifically. However, what's more important about my transition from the live simulator to the practice trades is a little bit of a discipline thing that I have that I do. I have to log my trades and I have to log my daily results before I start any kind of practice trades. It's just a little game that I play with myself to improve on discipline. And so that's one of the things that I have to do. And as you can see by the times, I closed my OBLN trade at 9:45 and opened on PTSB 8 minutes later or so, 7.5 minutes. And so I was scrambling very quickly. I opened up my trackers. I was jamming in the math and the risk or the entry and exit calculator, just ripping through it, trying to get enough time together to be able to leave room for research. And I think I only had maybe 45 seconds or a minute to be able to get that research done. And there was a headline on PDSB, and it is a low float. There were a couple things going for it, even though the daily chart was pretty atrocious looking. I did decide to get involved, and I immediately got frustrated and emotionally thrown off guard by the way that this trade went. Just to recap it very quickly, it got halted at 462. 10 minutes later, resumed at 478, and within probably 75% of 1 second was tapping $5. It ripped up very quickly, and I had intended to add above 480 and didn't get filled until $5, which really pissed me off. And that's when the emotions started to get into the situation. And I don't know for sure how long it took for this candle to go red, but from the resumption to 511, which was the high, I honestly think was maybe 1.5 seconds. It was a very quick ripper. It went up, tapped 511, and just plummeted, and it was disastrous. And my emotions really got the best of me on this, which, thank goodness, I had the presence of mind to make this practice trade and not actually in my account, which it never would have been. This isn't the type of setup I'm looking for. But in any case, I added on the way down, which is super indicative of not being on my game and being emotionally affected. I averaged down at 452 to give myself an average of 75, and I eventually stopped out as it was going into a downward halt right here. So all this put together with the two trades I took on OBLN and the account fees that are coming up overnight, which I'll have to do myself. That's going to be a manual removal of money. But my loss today of $108, which is the worst red day so far, that's going to add up to put my balance all the way back down to below 1900. So there's a bit of an emotional, effect of having a red day today in that it feels like I had, like a $230 loss, which for this account balance is really significant. However, the positive side of that is that, well, I've paid off my fees and I have an entire month, and it's a historically good month, which is October, to recuperate all that and to get back on track. So even though the account is going into the red by about $105, I'm not too worried about that. Like I said, I'm pretty comfortable with the trades, or at least the second trade that I took on OBLN, and even the first one, to be honest. I'm not that upset with myself. It's just that's the way that things went. And even though I could have made an argument to avoid trading today, my pre-market routine was very strong. I had stayed out fairly late last night, hanging out with a friend, and I thought that there was a good chance that I would wake up late and have to take the day off due to disciplinary failures. That wasn't the case. I got up at 7:30 and my morning went great. I felt great. My headaches that I've been having for the last couple of days were not there and everything felt good. So, I mean, I can't really beat myself up for this day, even though it's a red, and even though it's a substantial loser. I'm not really bothered by it that much. I think if I were to criticize myself for anything today, it was just to maybe get involved a little bit too early. Jumping in right after the bell is probably the trigger for not playing so well later, and I may have taken away an alternate future may have seen me have a green day today if I hadn't taken that trade so quickly. And so, my reaction to this in the next couple of days is going to be to pull it back a little bit. Focus on my results that were positive. What have I been doing right so far? And I think patience is the biggest thing. I was inactive on Tuesday, the 2nd of October. I had 2 inactive days last week. There have been a couple of no trades days so far, and I think that's a great sign. That's a great reaction to the market we're in. Going forward, there's a chance that I might swing my focus to the short side if ever it's possible, if I have shares available and the setup presents itself. But whether I'm going long or I'm going short, I'm definitely going to be focusing on just taking a step back, waiting for confirmation, and not being bothered by missing a move. If I miss the big one, it doesn't matter because it's going to, like I said in previous recaps, it'll trigger a market-wide reversal of action. Traders are going to get excited, and we're going to start to see those multi-halt, crazy run-ups that we've seen at this time of year in previous years. So even though it's a bummer of a day, I'm looking forward to the month coming up, and I'm certainly looking to tighten up my requirements for entering a trade.